Today's interview is with Josh Rhodes. Josh has the Rhodes To Wealth podcast, a great podcast. I listen to it to myself, but we talk a lot today about podcasting itself, why he thinks people should start, what are the benefits of it, how you can get started, what do you need, how do you find guests, all that good stuff. And also there was a really interesting story today in him talking about how his podcast started and how he was reaching out to people to connect with them. So if you're looking to start a podcast, if you're looking to connect with more people, today is a really, really good podcast for you guys to listen to. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multi-family real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Josh Rhodes. What's up, Josh?
Barry, how are you, brother? Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm doing awesome, man. We're having a super fun conversation before we started recording. So really excited to have it recorded because a lot of times, you're a podcast expert yourself. A lot of times the magic happens before you record. Yeah. I've been so guilty of that, and I've been trying to be so conscious these days of like, all right, let's save it for the show.
Yeah, cut it off. I've gotten in the habit of just pre-recording and then asking, hey, can I make a clip of this?
Yeah. Because it really, like, you get great conversations before and after. It's so funny, man. It's funny. Well, cool. We're so happy you're here. So excited to talk today. Do you want to sort of introduce yourself to the people so they have an idea about who you are and what you've been up to?
Definitely. Yeah. So as you mentioned, my name is Josh Rhodes. I'm a first generation graduate from the Rhodes family, that last name Rhodes. I went to college to play college football, and ball paid for school. I got a half academic, half athletic scholarship. They paid for 5. I graduated in 4, and I went to school to be a coach. A couple months before I graduate, my advisor sits me down and says, Josh, you're about to graduate number 1 in your class. Don't go into coaching. She's like, you need to go find a way to make some money and sort of use what you've built here and bounce off this. And if coaching is speaking to you years down the road, maybe you can fall back on it, but use what you've built here, right? Go out there. And so I pivoted a couple months before I graduate. I threw my name in the hat with a couple sales roles and found myself back in Houston, where I was born and raised. My family's here. So all of that was great. And I've been at the same company ever since. So I've been selling a cybersecurity solution. It's about 5.5 years now. We protect the public cloud, and there's a mixture here of past athlete life, just me enduring the grind and loving the work ethic piece of this. That past athlete life plus the fact cybersecurity, that term, and the world, the vertical, has only gotten hotter, especially since COVID hit and everybody's working remote. It's only growing. And I think the mixture of work ethic and sort of hot vertical allowed me to start building some disposable income a couple years into my role. Me being the first generation graduate, actually, when my mother was pregnant with me, she told my father about it, and my dad was going to play baseball for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Oh, wow. He drops out of baseball. He goes to work at a power plant. And my dad today still works at that same power plant. So that idea of like work ethic and grind, that's in my blood. But how to make your money work for you, or how to build wealth, what to do with sort of excess capital that you're not spending on bills and sort of spending in your month-to-month grind. What do you do with that? That is a black box to the Rhodes family. And I found myself sort of staring that black box in the face. And I'm a bookworm. I'm a student to the game. And I read lots of books, lots of podcasts, lots of blog posts. And I reached out to lots of these founders, these sort of the CEOs, the authors of these books, and said, listen, guys, I'm stuck. I've read lots of your stuff. I've consumed lots of your material. I use you as a sort of digital or virtual mentor, and I need some help. Do you have an hour to talk? And the response rate was outrageous. It was outrageous. I reached out. I think initially it was a hit list of the top 50. And let's say I got like 35 responses. It was insane. And I said, I think I'm onto something here. Instead of me being, let's put it in quotations, selfish and keeping this one-on-one, let me zoom out and sort of let the folks tune into this. And so I created a podcast where I have one-on-one conversations with folks that have built wealth in a variety of ways, certified financial planners, authors, CEOs, entrepreneurs, ex-NFL football players, the gambit. How did you get started? Talk to me about your journey. And the back half of this is extracting tactical advice, tips, things like that on how could we get started if that journey is speaking to us. So that's what I've got going on today. Sort of the 9 to 5 being the full-time sales guy, and pre 9 o'clock and post 5 o'clock, I'm working that Rhodes to Wealth hustle.
Very cool. Very cool. What when you said you were leaving college and you thought about coaching, do you think it would have worked out if you gone for coaching then? Do you wonder, are you glad that that was good? I'm basically asking, was it a good advice from that person, you think, to tell you to go with?
Man, so was it great advice? It was great advice to answer the question. And I'm now on what I feel to be this sort of journey to FIRE, right? And trying to become financially independent and retire early. And not to say you can't get there on a coaching grind. In fact, I've interviewed Andrew Hallam, who was a high school teacher and retired early. He achieved FIRE status. So not to say it's impossible, but it is a grind versus the route that I've taken has sort of set me up for success. I plan on house hacking this year. I'm a bit more stable to where I can at some point fall back on coaching. But to be just totally transparent, I think about it every day. I miss the camaraderie that comes with a team. And I told you offline, I left football and immediately entered into jiu-jitsu. I think at some point I'll have a dojo and at least run a couple classes. I may not go back to football, but it pulls on my strings every day. I like to think I'm kind of connecting the dots through the podcast, maybe a little bit, like I'm coaching others to wealth, right? But it was great advice, but I still think about it all the time, man. It's definitely still pulling up my strings.
Yeah, well, the reason I was asking, because it seems like that was your passion at the point, and someone, I thought the route you were going to go, I didn't realize you had a WTF. I thought you were going to say, they gave me advice and I ignored them. I went into coaching and it worked out. But it did work out, right? No, but it did work out. You have a great job and you have disposable income now that you can reinvest. And hopefully it goes full circle, right? That you create a lifestyle for yourself, because that's what I'm passionate about in terms of, I invest in real estate, but real estate's a tool to create the lifestyle that I want for myself. And through creating financial freedom and the FIRE movement, right? Financial independent, retire early movement is essentially creating a life for yourself, right? It's very, very few and far between that. The dollar amount is what's important to people. It's the lifestyle that you have. So it could hopefully comes full circle. So you create that financial freedom and you can then choose to have a dojo, choose to do high school football coaching or whatever you choose, right? You have that choice at that point. So cool. That's why I was asking that. That's so interesting as well that you reached out to these people and you weren't at that point, you weren't asking them to be on a podcast, right? You were just asking them for a one-on-one, just you and them conversation, right?
My first, let's call it 25 outreach attempts. It was just, I'd like to talk with you. Yeah. The response turned into something there in the first 25 where it was like 3 or 4 days in. I remember telling the lady, like, listen, almost everybody is responding. Like, what? Something weird is happening here. And it's, maybe I should, like, do you think I should record these? And it sort of started to become a thing. And so the back half of those, it was definitely around I'd like for you to come on a podcast. I'm thinking about launching something. I plan on recording it. And so I did not have a public podcast. I hadn't recorded anything. It was truly from I'm fanboying out in this email to you. At the end of the email, can I have, 40 minutes of your time or whatever the case was? I was asking for an hour, but let me have a little bit of your time.
Wow. And that's amazing that they would do that because I'm sure they get a lot of people. Was there anything, what was your approach? Was it just simply, what was your approach? Because I'm sure a lot of people would like to speak to these people, right?
Totally, man. Yeah. And and some of the folks that I landed, it was a serious blessing. I mean, someone like Dory Clark, who I think it's like $8,000 for a business to have her a half day, right? And then she gave me 45 minutes for a prep call and then an hour for a podcast, totally free. What was my approach? It's definitely very salesy. So you're going to hear a little bit of my sales background in this.
Okay.
But I mentioned at the top, I'm a bookworm, a podcast fiend. I mean, I think I call it, I'm a student to the game. At the bottom of my website, I say something like, I'm a student to you all. And so I have in my office a giant bookshelf of books that I actually pick up and open and go through and digest, and Audible books. After I've consumed all this, I've got loads of notes. And so I created a initial hit list when I said, man, I'm lost and I need some guidance here. I sat down, I made an Excel doc. I still have it today. It's a running hot list of folks that I should reach out to. And I marked their Amazon, their book, their Amazon link, their LinkedIn. I captured a bunch of information, and it took me 6, 7, 8 days. And I did lots of front loaded work. And then once this Excel doc was filled out, and like I said, there's probably 50 people on it, I started emailing them one by one, very custom, very snipered approach emails. But these are like top quality leads, right? Like if I could land 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour with these people, for me, that is a game changing conversation. It's a needle moving conversation. And so it's worth the time. It's worth the effort to get them on, to spend and create a custom email. And I'm reaching out and asking them, listen, guys, I've read 2 of your books. Here's here's a quote that I have written down. Here's something that I've implemented. You mentioned do this with your SEO. Check out my homepage and what I've done, right? Like pointing them back to, this is exactly what I've gotten from you. You mentioned, I love the masterclass SEO piece that you're putting on in your newsletter right now. So I'm pointing to stuff that I'm consuming of theirs. And at the very end saying, listen, the reason for the email, I apologize for the content rich email here. I'm very excited. I'm a huge fan. The reason the original reason I was reaching out before I fanboyed out above is I'm looking to start a podcast, right? And I'm looking to have a conversation, 30-ish minutes around these 2 topics that I've heard you cover before. I promise to make it most of your time. If you can't tell already, I'm going to make it worth your time, right? Like really pointing to, I've consumed your stuff. And I think, and I say this a couple times on my podcast, people want to help those that help themselves in small doses, right? So you're right. I think if I was reaching out and saying, I'm looking for a mentor, Dory, can we chat? Yeah. Right? Or Dr. Brad Klontz or whoever that is, like they get loads of those emails. They have master classes and masterminds that they put on for that purpose. They get paid to do that. But when they see someone that's fanning out, and I've reviewed their podcast and I've reviewed their book and I've got all this stuff copied and pasted and I'm showing it in an email and saying, guys, I'm in your top 100 fans and I want a little bit of your time. Can I have that? It's really, really hard to say no.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like you said there, the key is that you're not just someone who just saw their name or listened to a podcast that they were on and reached out and said, hey, I'd like to talk. No, you're consuming everything that you're doing. You're a fan of them, that what the content that they're providing and everything that they're doing is inspiring you, is changing your life, is improving your life, and you just want to feed into that. And this, who doesn't want to help someone who wants to be helped, right? Because it's one thing, like someone who asks a question that you can Google on Google, right? If you can Google an answer and then you ask it on one of these Facebook groups, well, like how hard have you tried, right? Have you really tried to find out the answer? You know what I mean? It's the same with this, right? Like you really tried to find out the answer. You were really wanting to be a part of their life and the circles that they were in. So I think that's awesome. I think that's so cool.
You're spot on, man.
I think it's cool that you did that though. Like some people might even have the balls to do that, right? It's like, it's awesome to like even, think to do that, right? Because more people would be scared to do something like that.
Man, so and it's funny you say this. I think around the time I started the podcast, I just finished, and I don't want to say that I heard this story here, but I just finished 4-Hour Work Week, and I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan. I got that at the bottom of my podcast. I will be a student to you all from Tim Ferriss. I remember hearing a story about him, and maybe it was in the 4-Hour Work Week, where he was given a talk to a college, and he said something like, I will pay for a round trip ticket for anybody in this auditorium if you can book a meeting with a celebrity. It doesn't have to be a long meeting. It doesn't have to be like, his very low criteria. The requirements were very low. He said, for anybody that can prove that you've done this, I'll buy a round trip ticket to anywhere in the world. You just got to prove it. And nobody in the audience did it. Right. And I thought that was that's so mind boggling to me. If someone offered me hey, I'm going to buy you a round trip ticket to anywhere in the world, all you got to do is book a celebrity, I would blow those people up. Right. And I don't know if that's the sales or prospecting side of me, or I think I want to go somewhere in the world, right? I want that round trip ticket. And if I parallel that to where I'm at on this podcast, I don't know a lick about building wealth. And if you want it bad enough, and I want it really bad, that's my round trip ticket, right? I'm going to reach out. I'm going to blow these people up. And I went and found the experts, and so sort of following that Tim Ferriss approach, I reached out, man. And like you said, I think people are reaching out. I don't know if it's as many as we think, though, right? I'm sure they're getting lots of smash and grabs of very broad nets. Hey, I'd like a mentorship. Can I have 30 minutes or whatever? I don't know if very many people are hitting with that sniper email like you and I are talking about right here.
Yeah, very true. I'll be interested. You've done a ton of podcasts now, and like you said, it's Rhodes to Wealth, right? It's focusing on that road to wealth, which is a great name, by the way.
Thanks, man.
Rather than ask you what are successful ways that you see people doing or whatnot, what are you doing? Because I'm sure you're not going to take the worst ideas and like, oh, this isn't very good, I'll apply it to myself. You're going to take everything that you've learned and apply it to your life, right? So if you don't mind sharing, what are you doing on your road to wealth? What is your blueprint?
Yeah. So I've probably interviewed, let's call it 125, 150 people at this point. I've just released episode 51 last Tuesday. So I'm almost a year out now. And the very first thing that I did was I went on this binge of cash flow, right? And remember, I mean, this is like wealth building 101 for me. And so I went on, what does my cash flow need to look like as it hits my bank and as I consume whatever that stream is coming from? What do I need to do with that next? And so my first sort of binge was on automating my wealth, changing where my checking, where my savings, where I was investing, and automating all of that, right? And so I simplified, sort of got on this couch potato portfolio method, set up an index fund, set up a few index funds, and got the hell out of the way. From there, and where we plan on taking this year, and I've got a couple things in flight. First, let me say 125 episodes. Anybody that has a book has sent me loads of books. Anybody that has a course has given me immediate access to their course, right? So I've got lots of content, lots of education going on in the back end. The virtual assistant that I hired for the podcast and for my side gigs came from a platform that the guest built using a hiring process that he developed. I've recently joined great.com, and I'm going to start helping them with their charity and growth efforts. And I've also just joined, I'm going to be an advisor on the board, and I don't think I can say the platform yet as he hasn't released it, but I'm going to be an advisor on a board for this sort of millennial focused wealth building app from one of the doctors that I've interviewed here over the last few weeks. Long of this is, I guess, wealth wise. Two more things. I am this year, by the end of 2021, I will be house hacking. And so I've had two house hackers on the podcast, Craig Curelop and Jordan Moorhead. Both of them are just experts when it comes to the field, and interviewed both of them, plan on executing a house hack before the end of the year. And I've recently partnered up with a couple self-storage guys. And so I think here by the end of the year, I'll be involved with either self-storage or raw land. But all of that to say, man, it's been a hell of a journey. And the first thing that I wanted to figure out was, what do I do with my cash? And from there, what avenue is going to interest me? It's almost analysis paralysis, right? At 125 episodes in, you want to do everything. What I've started to focus on and what I'll execute this year is that house hack, and then either the raw land or self-storage.
Interesting. That's interesting that you've gone from the index funds to now looking to be a little bit more active, I guess, right? Real estate is active, right? Unless you're investing in some kind of syndication.
It's a ramp, right? I feel like I built this foundation of like, all right, I've got support and I've started to figure out what this looks like. And it's so automated that I don't really need to really worry about it anymore. And so now I can start to focus my attention and my energy and my efforts on things that are starting to create wealth and look for more passive income streams. Yeah, man, I'm excited to see what this year brings.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, that's interesting that you're a year out. And what's the reason that you're a year out with your? Is it just so that you have plenty in the can and that you never have to worry about that?
Oh, dude, I've got a ton of episodes in the can, brother.
Yeah.
When I got started, and I mentioned Dory Clark, it's funny. Her book, Entrepreneurial You, is definitely what launched my podcast. In her book, one of the first chapters in there is It's about podcasting. And she says something at the time, it's written a couple of years ago now. She says something like, there are 600,000 podcasts out there on the podcast app. It was something crazy.
Yeah.
It's just a mind-boggling number. But over half of them, when I interviewed her, it was 900,000. So it had grown, but over half of them exhausted and retired before they hit episode 16. Right.
Wow.
And so that was that's a pivotal number for me. And so as I set out on, okay, I'm going to start a podcast here. I'm not going to die on the branch before 16 episodes. So I recorded 25 before I hit the green button. That way I knew there's no way in hell I'm going to die here before 16. I'm going to at least get to 25. And with that, I'm releasing one a week, not knowing at the time sort of how cool or how good that would be for me. I was 25 weeks in advance of content. So then I could be even more selective, right? And now I'm happy to talk about sort of how I go find my guests now, as I think it's not the cold prospecting efforts anymore, but it's allowed me to be more selective in who I interview. It gives me more time in between podcasts where I can research and do deep dives. And it's really allowed me to expand, right? Focus on wealth building aspects, focus on growing the podcast and social media and repurposing content, and writing blogs. It allows me to focus less on booking people and staying on top of that, just because I'm so far out now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we kind of touched on it before, I think, but you said that most people don't even get to 16. That's a fascinating number, actually. That people, I'm sure people get excited and they're like, "Oh, this is harder than I thought." But in your opinion, what are some reasons why people would want to start a podcast? And trust me, I'm a big fan of podcasting, but I was just interested in your point of view and your opinion.
I love this question, and I've thought about it a bunch. I've got three answers, sort of three reasons why I think someone will start a podcast. The first is you're an expert in a field, right? And I think take you as an example, WWE or performance industry. If you were going to start a podcast in the performance industry, or what the life inside of WWE looked like, you're an expert in that field. And so people would tune in just because they want to hear what you have to say, right? If you're an expert in math, or if you're an expert in teaching, or whatever that is, you could relay that, and people want to tune in because you're the savant, you're the guy in the field. They want to hear what you have to say. I think the first reason is you're an expert in the field. The second one is you're a student. And I think this is my bill. This is the where I fit in this. And a couple of years ago, wealth building being a black box, I could have paid thousands of dollars to attend conferences, join mastermind groups, do something like that, right? And try to build myself that way. Or I could start a podcast and invite those folks that run the mastermind groups and that write those books and that do this. I can invite them to come speak with me directly. Right? And as a student to the game, you can approach it like that. And people tune into your podcast because they want to know it too. People want to know how to build wealth. People want to know the side hustles that are possible. And how could you start in the service field? And what does automating your cash flow even mean? What would you invest in? Like, people want to know that. And so as I approach it as a student and I'm asking those kinds of questions, they have the same questions. So they tune in because they know you've done the research, you've done the homework, you had the platform, you're doing the legwork for them, right? So I think the first one, you're an expert in the field. The second one, you're a student to the game. The third one, and this is exactly what you're doing. It's what you mentioned, Ms. Holly, earlier. It's exactly what she's doing. And I think it's very underleveraged. It's if you have a business and you're able to create this feedback loop with your podcast, right? And I talked to a guy on my podcast, Ben Kruger, and he pointed to this pipe fitting study one time that they did a few years back, where they looked at the lead flow to this pipe fitting company, and the inbound leads, only about 20% of them closed in the first 30 days of their inception of reaching out to the company, about 20% of them. The other 80% of those folks closed from day 31 through the 1 year mark. So 365 or whatever that is, right? So there's a long time in between for that 80% for you to maintain contact, for you to follow up and keep a cadence and a relationship. And when you're doing that, how are you doing that, right? Are you sending them an email, and what are you saying in your email for 360 days? Are you calling them and once a month phone call with a prospect? What are you saying to them, right? You run out of shit to say. And so the podcast, and to answer the question here of why you would start this, you invite people that are in your ecosystem, partners, experts in the field, or potentially your customers, your prospects, and you ask them questions about the challenges that they're facing, what they're seeing, and issues they're having, and how they solved it. And they're able to talk about themselves and get all amped up and point friends and family to it. And they love the research you did. And if you crush it, they're going to go back and listen to that episode, and they're like, man, this guy really did his homework. I bet you he produces good content. And he's talking to, in my case, other IT guys. I bet you he's asking them good questions. I'm going to listen to this. And for the next 6 months, he's tuning into your podcast. And if you have a good clip and you hear a pain point that he talked about, you can clip it and send it to him. But the entire time, he's listening to your voice, and he's listening to your questions, and he's listening to you probe other people, and you're sending him content. Yeah, at day 150 or 180 or 300, when he's ready to buy, who do you think he's going to go to? Yeah. Right? He's not going to go to the guy that's dropping him cold emails of like, hey, here's a new white paper. I don't know if you've seen, but real estate is getting really hot in Austin. Like those probing emails, or picking up the phone and calling him and pressing him, hey man, are you ready to buy yet? And where are you at in your sales cycle? That shit doesn't work. But if you're keeping a real relationship and he hears you talking, you're in his ear every single week with good info, it's hard to break that, right? And I think you become the guy. So to answer your question, I know that's very long-winded.
No,
I think you started as a student. I think you could start it as an expert, and I think you could start it as a business owner, right? There are definitely other buckets there. I think a bunch of friends in a dorm room could get together, start a podcast. It's very low overhead and it's fun. You could talk shit and jokes and all sorts of things. But the three main reasons are the ones I just went over there.
Yeah, and it's so many things, right? Like you said, like for one, you get to meet all these people, right? That you manage to get in front of them, but a lot of people might. If you ask people to come, hey, can I get an hour conversation with you, or can I get you on my podcast for an hour? It's a different conversation, right? And you have the skills to get them for that hour conversation without that. But for other people, it's a lot harder. But if you tell someone, give me on my podcast, and you can talk about, well, everyone's favorite subject is themselves to start off with, right? But if you have something to promote, you can promote it. And then also, like you said, when you're in someone's ear all the time, people feel like they get to know you, right? There's people that's never met me, I'm sure, that maybe feel like they know me. Hopefully, they've listened to me long enough. And I know about the same thing has happened when I've listened to people, right? I've listened to someone, and then you meet them and you say, oh, hey, I feel like I know you. I feel like I've met you before, but you haven't. You've just listened to so many of their podcasts that they get to know you as a person. And I think that's a super powerful thing. For anyone who's looking to get started, do you also have any tips or suggestions how to get started? There's reasons why to get started, but just starting your podcast out, people who are like, I got this idea, I think I would like to start.
Yeah, I would say one, it's very, very simple to get off the ground. You don't need a website. In fact, just a secret, if you build a website, it doesn't mean traffic hits it, right? Like you just put it out there. And so you don't need a website. I would say the sort of bare minimum, you need a microphone. I'm talking into an Audio Technica. It has a USB port, so it plugs directly into your computer. Zoom is totally free. So it's about a $60-$70 microphone that you could just hold in your hand. It plugs into your computer, right into a free Zoom software that you can record. It records into 2 tracks for you, so you don't have to do anything there. You can edit to yourself, right, on GarageBand. So how to get started? We talked about the sort of outreach efforts earlier on. I think you need a microphone. And from there, man, I think the only other recommendation I'd have is to do some of that legwork early on, right? And I think not knowing that I was setting myself up for an easier road and a more successful opportunity. If you can preload or pre-record several episodes, drop 2 or 3 that first day and get folks excited about it. But you have 10, 12, 15, 20 pre-recorded, you're going to offload lots of work where if someone cancels, if something moves, if you have an emergency that pops up, you're not having to scramble and get something uploaded, right? If you miss a week, you start losing followers. So I think front loading some of that work gives you a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah. And then how are you finding guests now? What do you are there some best practices in terms of finding guests?
Dude, okay, yeah. Thank you for asking this. I'm super excited about this, and I'm not doing anything secret or magical, but I do think I think this is a really cool way. So, two things. After every episode, after every interview, at this point, I have a templated follow up email that I send these guys. Obviously, there are lots of customization that I have to do in that, but at least the framework of my email is built. Hey, man, you rock this. Give me 3 or 4 weeks to get this thing edited. I'm going to go pull your headshot from your media page, things like that. I'm always going to say that, so it's templated. But down there at the bottom of my email, one of the bullets is like, listen, now that you've seen the amount of work that I put into this, the effort that I bring, the energy that I bring, who I am, what I'm trying to go get, I loved this. I want to stay in your field. I want to continue to dive into this rabbit hole. Who in your network could you introduce me to where I could keep this momentum and I could keep this going? Dude, that bullet, it crushes. It crushes. So loads of introductions come from that. Most of my podcasts today are via introductions. That's the first way. It's definitely the highest hit rate. I would say, man, 80-90% of my podcasts today are coming from those warm introductions. And at that point, they're introducing you to main influencers or people that are key to in their ecosystem and potentially even their mentors, right? And so you're either staying in that circle that I feel like I don't belong in, or you're moving up the stack, which is it's even scarier, right? So
Right.
it's a really cool approach. The second one is something I've started to do recently, and I'm really excited about. I've had lots of success with this during a podcast, and I think I've done it 5 or 6 times unintentionally today. My guests will name drop names of other people that they've interviewed, talked with, mentors, books they've read, all sorts of things. And they'll talk really highly of these people. This guy's the OG in the industry. He's the best investor I've ever seen, this and that. I'll go back after the episode and clip that. Him talking about them, me responding and saying, man, that's great. I'd love to reach out to him, blah, 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 blah. And us chopping it up. And it's a 60-second clip. And then I'll craft that up and go to that guy's website and reach out to his contact me form. I'll put my clip that I've created for my podcast in a Dropbox folder. And then I'll email that guy directly and say, hey, Mr. New Guy, just had a podcast with X, and crossed your name 5 or 6 times in my research. It was incredible. I love your work. Believe it or not, on the podcast, he mentioned your name and we had a 60-second conversation about you. Check out this link in the Dropbox. Boom. They click that and they see them being talked about on my episode. Dude, it's shooting fish in a barrel at that point, right? I mean, you're hyper targeted. People love hearing about themselves. The fact that you're already in their world, you're talking to their ecosystem. I don't know if I've had anybody ignore that email yet. So it's not something that I do often, but every once in a while they'll name drop someone. After the episode, I go back and research and I'm like, oh shit, that could be a guy that really moved this podcast along, or that could be a guy I could really learn some stuff from. Let me go get him. And that takes a little bit more effort. It takes 30 minutes to write that email, but dude, it's a grand slam home run every time.
Yeah. What I love about you is no doubt that you go above and beyond, right? You're not going to do just a little bit of work, man. You're talking about that work ethic, right? It definitely kicks in, right? You just definitely go way above and beyond and willing to do what other people aren't willing to, right?
Maybe to your earlier point, man, and maybe I'm underplaying sort of what I'm doing, right? Just in sort of unintentionally, but maybe that's why the responses are coming and why I've been able to get where we're at and have the response rate. And maybe that's why, right? Is most people aren't doing that type of legwork up front. And when someone reads an email like that, or when someone gets a video chat or someone sees them being talked about, like, man, this guy's really doing the damn thing.
They can't be getting many of those emails, right? That's for sure. That's for sure. And it makes you stand out a million miles. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, this podcasting, man, is so powerful, like for so many different reasons, right? Just so many different reasons. People think a lot of times podcasting is about the people that listen, and it is, right? It's about us providing great content for this, right? And it's great the more people that listen and the more people that get it. But you get so much out, or I do anyway, personally, just from interviewing people like yourself, having awesome conversations, making connections, networking outside of this, right? You know, I do something to help you, you do something to help me. This is how we're talking today. Julie Holly, for me, interviewing her and getting to know her, she introduced me to you, and who knows where this, you know, next time you're in Vegas, you're going to come see the show, and that's how it works, right? That getting so much, and then just the education part of it, just from being on a call with someone for 40, 45 minutes, whatever it is, and hearing what they're doing, getting to soak up their knowledge, what they're doing is just so powerful, man. It's unbelievable, and it's fun, right? It's enjoyable.
Man, and you mentioned something there, and I didn't say this earlier on, but I think it's worth at least plugging in something else that I've tried to add in, and it's just about to your point. I think when you asked why are you starting a podcast, I didn't say, or why would someone start a podcast? I didn't say to have 1 million followers or to become a millionaire, right? Like that's not, X does not equal Y in that case. But the network that you can build with a podcast it's unparalleled, right? Like you can join Clubhouse, you can get on Twitter, you can get on LinkedIn, and all that's fine. And you can catch fire, and you can do all this cool stuff and go viral. Podcasting creates legit relationships. And one of the cool things that I've started to implement every 25 episodes, I will send a board of advisors or a board of mentors update. And the last 25 folks that I've interviewed all get an email on BCC. Hey guys, here's the last, just a quick update on where Rhodes to Wealth is at, where I'm at. As you guys know, I'm on this journey solo, right? And then I give a huge update of things that I've accomplished, courses that I've taken, people that I've been engaged with, people that I want to land on the podcast, a couple questions I have around SEO and domain names, and how can I go land joshrhodes.com, and weird questions like that I'm like, dude, I don't know how the hell where to go from here. I plug those in that email, and it's happening every 25, right? And so I'm doing it twice a week. It's a semi-annual email. Almost everybody responds to it. Hey man, here's a little bit of advice. Here's a great, love that you took this course. Have you ever thought about taking this? I know this person. It's phenomenal, man. And to your point, you go to a trip, you take a trip to a different state. Next time I go to Vegas, I will absolutely hit you up. You take a trip to a different state, you have that relationship. Every 25 episodes, you have that relationship. They're giving you feedback. They're making introductions. One of the guys that I interviewed gave me wealthinterviews.com just as a gift, right? After I interviewed him, like the community that you build and what you start to pull together it's insane, man.
Yeah, it's really cool, really cool. Before we dive off the podcast topic, is there anything else you'd like to tell people or advise people or suggest or say anything whatsoever about podcasting?
Man, I don't think so. I think the only sort of other piece of advice that I would give is early in my podcasting, before I ever went live, and maybe like my second interview, I talked to this guy that lives out of Austin, the pitch whisperer, John Livesey, and he said something like, when I got off the episode, he said, "Man, who is going to edit your podcast? Are you doing this yourself?" And at the time, I was doing the heavy lifting. I was trying to figure that out. And he said, "Listen, if you can swing it, I would find a virtual assistant. I'd find a way to offload this, unless you love it." And I told you on before we got the podcast started, I'm a dinosaur on technology. So the idea like, oh, I've got to go back in and edit this, and the video and the audio, and put the intro and put the outro and this and that, dude, I could probably figure it out and work a couple days, and it's not something I wanted to spend some cycles on. And I was telling him that, and he said, "Listen, when I started my podcast, I started the same time as one of my best friends. She decided to edit her podcast. I decided to outsource to a VA." He's like, "Today, I'm at about 250 episodes. She's at 0. He was like, the find what you're really good at and try to stay there as much as you can. Offload as much as possible in the outskirts of that." Obviously, and my pitch when you said, how would you start a podcast, is it's very low overhead. You don't have to do anything like that. You can get an Adobe or a GarageBand. You can get in here and edit this thing yourself and learn the ins and outs. Julie does that and said, "Listen, I would prefer to do that." Right? I don't know if you edit yours, but
no.
Yeah. Okay. So you and I are the same there.
Yeah.
And I kicked this to somebody else and said, "You guys handle this." And so I think the only thing that I'd plug is, if you can take it as you start to develop your process and figure out, oh, shit, I really enjoyed that, and that was really fun. But dude, if I've got to do this for 3 years, I cannot do this. find a standard operating procedure, find what that needs to look like, and outsource it. Get rid of it.
Yeah, man, that's great advice, because that stuff can bog you down if it's not something you have an interest in, something you enjoy. Like you said, that person with that's that 250 episode, the other person's at 0. That was enough to stop them, right? You don't want to find anything that can stop them. The great thing about VAs, you can find VAs from Fiverr and Upwork and all these different sites, that it's very cost effective, right? I have a friend that does mine, and he's amazing. So I was lucky that I found him. But there are plenty of ways to do it that doesn't have to break the bank. Now there are people that they'll do everything for you and they make it so easy, but they're expensive, right? So there's always a balance between all of that. But and the great thing with podcasting, anyone can do it, right? Like you said, $60 mic, like a pair of headphones. Yeah, everyone has a laptop, right? If you want to you have a webcam, like you can touch so many people eventually, right? If that's, and who knows, right? Or you can just have conversations with people that you like having conversations with. There's so much stuff you can do, and it just, in the comfort of your own home, you can do all this. It's just amazing.
I told my brother, my brother's a freshman in college. He just went back for his second semester. I said, dude, the fact that you didn't start when your first semester in college, you're a fool. You're a fool. Like you need to be talking to students on campus. You need to be talking to teachers, and use the I said one of the reasons to start a podcast is you're a student. I'm calling myself a student to the game, dude. You are a student. Like reach out to these people and ask questions, and what a better audience, right? Like they want to talk to you right now, and you can lean on the fact I'm young, I'm hungry. What better time, man? I echoing myself here. There's not a better route.
Yeah, for sure. Cool, man. Well, that's awesome, man. That's just really cool to hear everything you say, man, and for you to articulate it so well. I really, really appreciate all of that. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, we're going to adapt it a little bit, but still it's going to be the same thing. We're going to incorporate some wrestling questions into the show. So the first question is, what would your wrestling name be?
Nice. So I've got, this come off the top of my head, but this is a good one, I think. Okay. I think I would do Rocky Rhodes.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a giant dog, an English Mastiff, that recently I had to put down, but that was his name, Rocky. I lean on that all the time, man. And I don't know, there's a play on words there. I think there may even been it's a Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty Rhodes,
Dusty Rhodes in wrestling. I think I would settle on Rocky Rhodes. I like that.
I think he's got a good ring to it. So every wrestler has a special move. What is your special move?
Listen, I was listening to The Undertaker talk about this Kimura that he does, and I cannot remember what he called it, but I'm a huge fan of the People's Elbow. So I think I would probably lean on the People's Elbow or something of the sort, man. I like the whole pull a sleeve off. I like that thing, man.
That's awesome. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken?
That's a tough one, man. I think we didn't talk about this. My junior year of high school, I fully committed to West Point. It's interesting, actually. This morning I was listening to a podcast of yours with Tyler. Was it Goebel?
Mm-hmm.
That I believe he was a Navy football player. I had committed to the Army, and 2 weeks before I was sort of fully enlisted or committed to West Point, my stepmother was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and they told her she would not see me graduate high school. And so I made a very quick pivot, because you have to focus. If you go to West Point, you have to be there 9 years, and you come home, I think it's once a year. I can't quite remember. I think it's once a year. And I was just not willing to do that. Right. And I think I would call it as an absolute body slam, not only a body slam, but it felt like it came from his tag team player, right? Like I was looking over here, and this guy came in and body slammed me from the backside. I made a quick pivot. I had several offers on the table from other colleges, and found the school that I went to play for. But it was a huge body slam, man. And my family was able to recover. They picked up. My stepmother still alive, working, active, kicking. Did a rope course with me a few weeks ago, so she's a monster. And we made a recovery, but it was a body slam nonetheless, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you recovered. I'm glad your stepmom is okay, man. That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
Man, I think what I want to give is the coaching, the leap from coaching to sales, and that was not an easy one. There was lots of emotions, lots of tears involved in that. My high school, college coaches had a huge impact on me. My father was my coach the entire time as I was growing up. I know the impact that a good coach can have on people. And I wanted to rinse and repeat that. I wanted to replicate that. I wanted to work with others. And the idea of me not taking that and me not being able to exercise that was really tough to grapple with early on. I worked with my counselors. I worked with my family. I've found somewhere here in Houston to be able to surrounded by. And I think what I've settled on is what I talked about earlier of, there are lots of ways to coach. There are lots of ways to lead and to provide guidance. I'm trying to exercise one of those now. And I think I will continue to pull on those levers here in the future, but
Yeah, very cool. Well, man, I really appreciate you making the time. It's been a phenomenal interview, no doubt about it. It's just really enjoyed today's conversation. This is why I do it, right? This is why we do it, for these really cool and awesome conversations with amazing people. So I really appreciate you making the time. But we talked about it a few times. Plug your podcast again. Where can people find it? When do you release? All that good stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for having me, man. It's been a huge honor, and I didn't realize it, but I'm a huge fan and have been one for a few years now. Right. So it's crazy, man. I've since Julie has introduced me, I've consumed lots of your material, and I think you do a phenomenal job. You do a lot of prep work, and it's been amazing, man. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
My podcast, rhodetowealth.com. My last name, RHODES, rhodestowealth.com. We release every Tuesday. And then I'm Rhodes to Wealth on all social media channels, and I repurpose content and all that good stuff. But the easiest place to find me, get a hold of me, all that is rhodestowealth.com.
Okay. And then if anyone wanted to help you, provide something for you, bring value to you, what are you looking for? How can someone do anything for you or help you at all?
Man, I am open for options. You don't know what you don't know, and I don't want to cut anybody off. Yeah. So if you have something or if you hear something, please reach out. Right now, I'm open to guest introductions, and if you have anything real estate related, which is interesting, I've been doing a deep dive in like the world of parking lots lately.
Okay, wow. Okay.
So if there is anybody out there that's interested in being interviewed in that world, give me a shout.
Phenomenal. Okay, maybe I can have you back on once you've taken down a few parking lots, so you can.
That would be killer, man.
That would be very cool.
I'm probably knee deep in the rabbit hole already, and yeah, it's super interesting, man. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know one way a lot of people can provide value. If they go and give you subscribe to your show and give you a 5-star rating and write a great review, if you guys can go ahead and do that, that would definitely help Josh out for sure.
Man, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much, man, for being here. And again, if people want to reach out to you, how can they get in touch? How can they find out more about you outside of the podcast?
Yeah. The Rhodes to Wealth has LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. My direct email is info@rhodestowealth.com. But that website there, man, it's got everything you guys need. I'm super simple and unified.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, man. Can't wait for you to come out to Vegas and for me to give you a backstage tour for sure.
Yeah, brother. I'm looking forward to it, man. Yeah.
Cool.